Most people think $20,000 is a small number. They're wrong. That number is not a destination. It's a trigger. Something shifts when you cross it, not in your bank account, in your brain. And that shift is the difference between people who stay broke and people who quietly build wealth. Here's what nobody tells you. The average person in their 20s has less than $800 in savings. 800. That's not a financial cushion. That's one bad month away from disaster. One unexpected bill, one missed paycheck, one car that breaks down, and the whole thing collapses. That's the financial reality for the majority of people right now. Not a minority, the majority. So when you reach 20,000, you're not just ahead. You're in a completely different world. But here's the question you should actually be asking. Not how to get there, but what happens after. Because most people who hit that number lose it. Not because they're unlucky, because nobody explained what 20,000 actually does to your life. Nobody explained the psychological traps. Nobody explained what your brain starts doing differently. Nobody explained the invisible forces that will pull that money right back out of your hands. And the real reason most people self-sabotage at this exact stage is psychological, not mathematical. We'll get to that. But first, you need to understand what you've actually built. Because what $20,000 really represents is not what you think it is. Let's talk about the story most people tell themselves. You work hard. You save aggressively. You cut out the lattes, the subscriptions, the little things. You finally hit $20,000. And you think, now I'm safe. Sounds logical. But here's the flaw. Safety and security are not the same thing. $20,000 sitting still is not a strategy. It's a waiting room. A waiting room where inflation comes in every year and quietly takes its cut. A waiting room where your lifestyle slowly expands to meet your new sense of comfort. A waiting room where you stop watching the account as closely because you feel like you've already won. Here's what actually happens to most people at this stage. They feel wealthy for the first time. They relax. They upgrade their lifestyle a little. A better apartment, a newer car, a few more dinners out. And within 18 months, the 20,000 is gone. Not spent recklessly, just absorbed, slowly, quietly, without a single dramatic decision. No one moment you can point to, no one thing you regret buying. Just 100 small upgrades that each felt reasonable in the moment. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because you can't fight a decision you never consciously made. This is where most people get stuck. They confuse reaching a number with changing a system. And those are two completely different things. Let's be honest about something. Saving $20,000 is not hard if you have the right income. What's hard is keeping it, growing it, protecting it from your own impulses. Because here's a stat that should make you pause. Lottery winners in the United States were no wealthier 5 years later than people who never won at all. Why? Because the money changed. But the system didn't. Their habits didn't change. Their relationship with money didn't change. Their identity didn't change. And within a few years, the money simply returned to where their behavior pointed it, which was zero. And this is where most people fail. They treat 20,000 like a finish line. What's actually a starting condition. Now here's what actually changes when you have $20,000. And I'm not talking about your bank account. I'm talking about your nervous system. There's a concept in behavioral economics called scarcity mindset. When you have no savings, your brain is running in survival mode. Every decision is urgent. Every risk feels existential. You can't think long-term because your brain physically won't let you. When your mind is consumed with financial stress, there is literally less mental space for everything else. Problem solving, planning, impulse control, all reduced. A Harvard study measured cognitive performance in people under financial stress. The results were staggering. Financial stress reduced IQ scores by the equivalent of losing a full night's sleep. Every day, think about what that means. The person making financial decisions while broke is literally not operating at full capacity. And here's where it gets circular. Scarcity produces bad decisions. Bad decisions produce more scarcity. It's not a character flaw. It's a biological loop. And most people are trapped in it without ever knowing why. But when you reach $20,000, something clicks. You stop making decisions from fear. You start making decisions from position. You're no longer asking, can I afford this? You start asking, should I do this? That is a seismic shift. You're probably wondering, isn't 20,000 still a small number in the grand scheme of things? Yes. Mathematically, yes. But psychologically, it crosses the threshold from reactive to strategic. And strategy compounds. Reaction just burns. This is the part people overlook. The number isn't the power. The mental shift that comes with the number is. Because now you can say no to the job you hate, to the deal that doesn't feel right, to the pressure to spend just to keep up. That no is worth more than most people realize. Because every time you say no from a position of security, you preserve something that money can't buy back. Time, options, leverage, and that ability to say no is one of the most valuable financial assets a person can own. Let's get into the actual numbers, because the math here is quietly devastating. $20,000 at rest does almost nothing. In a standard savings account earning 1% annually, after 10 years, you'd have about $22,000. $2,000 in a decade. That's less than what inflation ate. Inflation in the United States has averaged around 3% annually over the last 30 years. That means your $20,000 is losing purchasing power every single year it sits idle. In 10 years, at 3% inflation, that $20,000 in purchasing power is effectively worth about $14,800. You didn't spend a cent, but you lost over $5,000 in real value. But $20,000 invested in a diversified index fund at an average annual return of 8% after 10 years becomes $43,178. After 20 years, $93,219. After 30 years, $201,253. You didn't add a single extra dollar. You just stopped letting it sit still. That's the power of compound interest working uninterrupted. Albert Einstein allegedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he said it or not doesn't matter. The math proves the point. The returns in year 1 are small. The returns in year 10 start to feel real. The returns in year 20 change your life. The returns in year 30 create generational outcomes. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. If you invest that $20,000 and add just $500 a month, which is achievable on a median income with focused budgeting, after 30 years, you'd have over $840,000. Not a millionaire on paper. Functionally financially independent. $500 a month. That's about $16 a day. The cost of 2 coffees and a sandwich. The math is not complicated. The discipline is. And that's the only real barrier between you and that number. Let's be clear about what actually created that outcome. Not the 20,000. The decision to stop treating money as something to spend and start treating it as something to deploy. The truth is, most people never reach $200,000 in net worth. Not because they don't earn enough, because they never learn the difference between money you have and money that works. $20,000 is your first chance to make that distinction real. And here's what's wild about that distinction. Most people who earn good money never make it. There are people earning $100,000 a year with less in savings than someone earning $40,000. Not because of circumstances, because of behavior. Income is what you earn. Wealth is what you keep and multiply. Those are not the same skill. And most people only ever develop the first one. Now let's talk about what to actually do, because this is where everything changes. There are 3 moves that separate the people who keep 20,000 from the people who quietly watch it disappear. Move 1. Lock the floor. The first thing you do with 20,000 is assign a floor, a number you will never go below. Not for emergencies, not for a down payment, not for anything that feels urgent in the moment. Pick a number, 10,000, 15,000, whatever your floor is, and make it untouchable. Why? Because the floor is what keeps you out of scarcity mode. The floor is what keeps your brain strategic. The floor is what prevents the psychological reset. When you dip below your floor, something subtle but powerful happens. Your brain registers it as a loss. And the research on loss aversion is clear. Losses feel twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. That pain triggers reactive behavior. And reactive behavior, as we've already covered, is expensive. People who don't set a floor spend down to zero and start the cycle over. Every time, move two, split the stack. Once the floor is locked, divide what's above it into three categories. Emergency reserves, 3 to 6 months of expenses. Keep this in a high-yield savings account earning at least 4 to 5%. Right now, many high-yield accounts are offering between 4 and 5% annually. On $10,000, that's $400 to $500 a year just sitting there. Investable capital. Whatever's above your emergency fund goes into a brokerage account. Low-cost index funds. A Roth IRA if you're in the United States. A TFSA if you're in Canada. The goal is to let compound interest run. Opportunity fund. A small allocation, maybe 5 to 10% of the total. Kept liquid for opportunities. A course that can increase your income. A business tool that saves you 10 hours a week. A skill that unlocks a higher paying role. This third category is the one most financial advice ignores. Because most finance content treats human capital as fixed, as if your salary is just a number that exists. But the data tells a different story. The average return on investment for education and skill development is between 10 and 15% annually, better than most stock portfolios, with no market volatility. The most underrated investment you can make in your 20s and 30s is in your own earning potential. Move 3. Kill lifestyle inflation immediately. This is the move that most people skip. The moment people get to 20,000, they feel like they've earned a reward. And sometimes they have. But the reward can't be permanent lifestyle inflation, because lifestyle inflation is nearly impossible to reverse. Once you move into the nicer apartment, downgrading feels like failure. Once you start flying business class, economy feels unbearable. Your lifestyle becomes your minimum. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, the process by which humans rapidly adjust to new circumstances and return to a baseline level of happiness. What that means in practice is this. The upgrade always stops feeling like an upgrade, and then you need another one. It's a treadmill with no off switch, and the speed keeps increasing. And here's the brutal math on that. If you increase your monthly spending by $500 when you hit $20,000, that's $6,000 a year not being invested. Over 20 years at 8% returns, that's $306,000. Gone. Not from one bad decision, from one slow, invisible habit. Now here's the part that nobody talks about. And this might be the most important thing in this entire video. When you hit $20,000, you have to change who you think you are. Most people carry an identity built on scarcity. I'm not a money person. I'm just not good with finances. Rich people are lucky or corrupt. Those stories protect you from trying. Because if you never try, you can never fail. And here's the thing about identity stories. They're not just passive thoughts. They're active filters. When you believe you're not a money person, you stop reading about money. You stop tracking your spending. You deflect financial conversations. You don't negotiate. You don't invest. You don't ask. And then your outcomes confirm a story, which makes the story feel even more true. It's not reality. It's a loop. But once you have $20,000, that story stops being true. You built something from nothing or close to it. You made decisions, held a line, delayed gratification. That is not luck. That is identity. What most people miss is this. The behaviors that got you to 20,000 are the same behaviors that get you to 200,000. They just need to be pointed at bigger targets, with better systems, over a longer time frame. The shift isn't about the money. It's about realizing you're someone who does this. Let's be honest about what that means practically. People with an abundance identity negotiate their salary. People with a scarcity identity are just grateful to have a job. People with an abundance identity walk away from bad deals. People with a scarcity identity take whatever they can get. People with an abundance identity invest time in understanding money. People with a scarcity identity avoid looking at their bank account. The gap between those two people is not income. It's not education. It's not even opportunity. It's self-concept. It's the story they carry about who they are in relation to money. And you can change that story, not with affirmations, with evidence. $20,000 is your evidence. $20,000, if you use it right, is the proof that you've already started the shift. Here's the breakthrough. Money isn't the only thing that compounds. When your financial floor is secure, your decisions across every area of your life get better. You take the job with better growth potential instead of the one with a safe paycheck, because you can survive a risk. You negotiate instead of accepting the first offer, because you have something to walk away to. You invest in skills, tools, and relationships, because you can think past next month. Think about how many career decisions people make from desperation. How many people stay in jobs that are slowly killing their potential because leaving feels financially impossible. How many people accept a salary lower than they deserve because they can't afford to walk away from the table? Financial security doesn't just change what you can afford. It changes how you show up in every negotiation, every opportunity, every risk. This is the compound effect that never gets discussed in personal finance content. It's not just your money that grows. It's your options. It's your judgment. It's your career. It's your relationships. It's your health. All of it becomes more stable when your foundation is stable. A Federal Reserve study found that people with 3 months of liquid savings reported 67% less financial anxiety than those with none. 67%. That's not a number about wealth. That's a number about quality of life. And quality of life is not a soft metric. It directly affects your cognitive performance, your physical health, your relationships, your ability to show up consistently in your work. The people at the top of almost every field don't just have better skills. They have better foundations. And a stable financial base is one of the most underrated components of that foundation. And quality of life affects performance. Performance affects income. Income affects investment. Investment affects freedom. It all connects. Starting with that first 20,000. Here's the truth about the first 20,000. It's not really about the money. It's about what the money proves. It proves you can delay. You can resist. You can build something invisible for months or years before you see a meaningful result. That skill, that single, quiet, underrated skill, is rarer than people think. We live in a world that is engineered against it. Every app, every ad, every notification is designed to pull you toward the immediate. Buy now, pay later. You deserve it. Don't miss out. The entire consumer economy runs on your inability to wait, which means every time you choose the long game, you're going against a system that was specifically designed to stop you. That's not a small thing. That's a fundamental act of self-determination. Most people quit before they cross the threshold. Most people upgrade their life before they've built their floor. Most people let the feeling of safety become the reason to stop. Don't be that person, because the first 20,000 is the hardest money you'll ever make. Not because of the income, because of the discipline required to keep it. The second 20,000 is easier. The third is easier still. And somewhere around the second or third or fifth milestone, you'll look back and realize the number was never the point. The point was never the balance in your account. It was the version of yourself you had to become to build it. More patient, more intentional, more disciplined, more clear about what you actually want from your life. And here's what almost nobody acknowledges. That version of you is transferable. It doesn't just apply to money. It applies to health, to relationships, to the work you choose, and how seriously you pursue it. When you learn to delay gratification in one area of your life, the skill bleeds into everything else. Slowly, quietly, almost without you noticing. That person doesn't just keep the 20,000. That person builds something that can't be taken. The point was becoming someone who doesn't stop. And this is where everything changes.